Hi, everybody. I'm Diana. Welcome into Build a Quilt and welcome to week 1 of our Star Chart Quilt Along. I'm really excited to be able to do this quilt along with you guys because I wasn't sure we were going to be able to do a year-end quilt along this year. If you are like a lot of people, a lot of crazy things have been going on, right? And you might have been super busy this summer. It was super duper hot where we were, but I had a huge garden this year. I grow flowers. And also I had so much to do, plus everything else that we do here at Build a Quilt. Um, we had family craziness with our home going on. We had floors replaced. We found water damage that had to be repaired, on and on and on. So I wasn't quite sure if I was going to get to do a quilt along for the year end or not, but we are. And if you don't already, I put out a intro video to the quilt along with some information a couple weeks ago. You can check out that video if you want, but everything you need will start in today's video. So let's go over things a little bit. This is going to be a 4-week quilt along. I think that's the shortest quilt along I've ever done, but it's actually a very easy quilt to make. It's going to be a 40 by 40 quilt. Why 40 by 40? I love wall quilts, and I think a 40 by 40 is a good sweet spot for a wall quilt. If you have a nice generous wall, like a hallway wall or a wall in a dining room or a wall in your bedroom, if you want to, or an office space, you might want to put it in, because what are quilts besides something that we can snuggle up in? They're art. So please feel free to use them in that way. But a 40 by 40 is also a great nursery sized quilt. And I was thinking about this quilt and I thought this would look so lovely done in nursery colors for a new baby coming into a family or to a friend. So if you're a grandparent having a new grandchild, or you're a parent and you're having a new child and you're going to zhuzh up maybe a room that's been used for other children, but you want to make it special for this baby, add the Star Chart quilt to it. It will be lovely. Or you could even do this in holiday colors if you wanted to. So Star Chart is only 40 by 40, so it's not going to take a very long time. And if you don't know, Build a Quilt is all about making our patchwork with the hoop of our embroidery machine. And it's super simple to do. All is a basic home embroidery machine that has a 5 by 7 hoop. Now, if you have a bigger, larger machine with bigger hoops, that's great too. But this is all you need to do, I'd say 99% of all the stuff we do here at Build a Quilt. So you'll also need some wash-away stabilizer, just a general wash-away stabilizer, not necessarily well, for sure, not the most expensive or brand named wash-away out there. Because this system is made for this stabilizer to be washed away when you wash the quilt, so that you only have fabric, batting, and backing, and no extra bulk or anything in your quilt left over from the stabilizer. So it's a super simple system. It is a flip and stitch system, but it's not a quilt as you go type scenario. We're not doing it on the batting. We're making actual patchwork. So you can see just a few blocks back here that we've done in this past year. And it, like I said, at the end, it is just like any other quilt. It's just another way to quilt. So a lot of folks who have had hand problems like this method, a lot of folks with visual problems like this method, and a lot of new quilters like this method too. People who have tried quilting but given up on it because of the precision. Now, I've been quilting for over 55 years, and I know it took me years and years to get where my quilts look even halfway decent in my eye. But that's because quilting is an art of precision. With Build a Quilt, your digital files that you make your segments pieces with have all of that precision built into them. So it's super simple to do. You can end up with perfect seaming every single time. Your points match, all of that, without having to take weeks, months, and years to learn how to do it. So let me show you our quilt. Now, I don't have a finished quilt to show you because I'm going to be making this quilt with you. This is our Star Chart, that's a tongue twister, quilt that we're going to be making. Let me flip over to my overhead camera. Well, actually, no, we don't need to do that yet. So this is the pattern packet. With this packet, you are also going to get a file folder that has your 2 segment pieces in it. That's right, this whole quilt only takes 2 segment pieces, and they're 2 of the absolute simplest, 2 of the most often used, but simplest ones to make, the half square triangle and the square. These are our 2 segment pieces that you're going to be making. Now, what's in this information packet? Each week for 4 weeks, there is going to be a video like this one. At the end of my talking with all of you, there are going to be any demonstration videos. Now, at the end of this video today, you're going to get the demonstration videos on how you create the half square triangle and the square. And then later on down the road, you're going to get another demonstration on how we connect all of these pieces. But that's going to be, I think that's coming up on week 3. Now, in here, it tells you you have everything you need to know for the entire quilt along. So if you are a Build a Quilter already, as so many of you are, and I am so thrilled about that. I can't believe so many of you love this program, and I'm thrilled. It kind of makes me a little teary sometimes to think about it. But if you are, you'll know from what's in here how to go ahead and you could just start your quilt if you wanted. But if you want some extra little tips, if you want all that information as we go along, or if you're new to Build a Quilt and this technique, then follow along the 4 weeks with the videos. They'll come out at noon on Tuesdays. The dates are in here. Today is the 3rd. And so for the next 3 Tuesdays after this, so we'll finish it right before Thanksgiving. Now, if you're not done by then, that's not a problem. You can finish it whenever you like, but you'll have everything you need to do so. That's why a lot of quilt alongs, I give you a packet each week. You're getting everything all in this one packet today, except for the pressing chart and pressing map information. That is going to come out, I believe, next week. And the reason it's not out, I'll just be honest, I didn't have time to double check it all. We had a super busy weekend here at our house of doing projects. And so I wasn't able to actually double check it to make sure that it's exactly the way I want it. So I'm going to do that. And that will be a download, a free download for you next week. So this pattern with the digital files and everything you need is just $11.95 over at our website. And I'll share that information with you, how to get there and all in a little bit. But let's talk about what we want, what's in here, and then what we're going to do this week in our quilt along. So I showed you when I opened up, I always give you in my patterns, I show you examples of the segments you're going to make, because when you look at our quilt, that can look like it's something pretty complicated, but when you know it's only made with 2 segment pieces, that makes it far simpler, right? Because you know you're not going to be doing any Y seams. There are no Y seams with Build a Quilt. You're not going to be doing any kind of oddly pieced together things, nothing like that. So that's why I give you that information. Then your next sheet is a supply sheet, your stabilizer, your thread, all of that I suggest that you use. Now, you can always use a 40 weight thread, but I actually prefer the Wonderfil Deco Bob 80 weight in pearl gray. And it is an 80 weight thread, but it is perfectly strong enough for our patchwork. And it helps take some bulk out of the seaming that you get using a 40 or 50 weight thread. But all that information is right in here. Then you get a whole information sheet and instruction on how we're going to run the quilt along this time. You've got dates, tells you what's in here, all of that information. So all of that is on that page. Then we have a basic instruction page on how the flip and stitch method works, general instruction on how you create. Okay. Then on the back, I'm giving you a one block breakdown chart so that you can see what the main block that you're going to be creating is going to look like, to help you visualize how you're actually going to break this whole quilt down. Then we get into the really meat of the stuff that you're going to need. You're going to have a fabric sheet. This is going to tell you what types of fabrics you have. Now, I have listed my fabrics that I'm using, and that information was also in the original video, intro video I did, and I showed you. I'm using 4 Kimberbell fabrics. They're all listed, and the swatches on here are exactly what the fabrics look like. So if you want to use these fabrics, you can do that. However, if you decide that you wish to use another color scheme, and in that original intro video, I also showed you a mock-up of this quilt done in magenta colors and pinks. So if you want to do a different color scheme, you can certainly do that. But you'll know based on here, if you need a dark, a light, a medium, anything like that. And then I always give you in my patterns a coloring sheet. This is a coloring sheet for the entire quilt. Get out your colored pencils, your markers, your crayons, whatever you want, and use this to play around and figure out what colors you want to use. Or what somebody did in Build a Quilt, and she sent me a note. This has been about 8 months ago. What she does is she actually cuts out little pieces of fabric, little swatches, and sticks them on here to see how things are going to look. So she actually comes up with this teeny tiny quilt. You don't have to do that, but if you want that kind of detail on what your quilt is going to look like in the fabrics you're choosing, you could do it that way as well. So that's the next part. And then you're going to get what I call the cut sheet. This is going to tell you exactly how to cut your yardage. Build a Quilt is really easy because it's based on a square system. And so typically you're only cutting strips of fabric at a certain width and then subcutting. And that's what this page is going to tell you. And then you're going to have what we call a segment creation chart. What this tells me is that when I look, and this is for a single block. So if you cut what is in that fabric creation sheet, you will make one block. Okay, I'll tell you right now, you're going to make 4 exactly the same. So you would just repeat this 4 times, right? So a total of 4 times, but that's going to tell you, and your little swatches here show you, is it a square or is it a half square triangle? So you'll know exactly what you're making. All righty. And then, oh, it was at the bottom of this one. Then I have that block done as a layout. I break it out here with all the pieces. Then we turn it into rows, and then we turn it into our block. See how simple it is to follow along? Super, super easy to do. And then there's also a layout chart for the full quilt. Then in this packet, you're also going to get 2 pages that are going to talk about binding, backing, and batting. And so what I've done for the binding is I've told you exactly how many strips you need to cut for a 2.5-inch binding. That's what I feel like is really the sweet spot for a quilt like this. You could always decide to use a 2-inch or a 3-inch if you wanted. You'll need to do your own calculations in that part. But the 2.5 inch is a really nice binding and a good average size binding. And so if you're going to use a typical 44, 45-inch fabric, then you're going to use so many cut strips for at 2.5 inches. All of that, and it'll tell you exactly how much yardage you need. So all of that is in there for the binding. And then the next sheet is all about the backing and the batting. And in the backing and batting sheet, I'm giving you information whether you're going to use a 108 or a wide back, or you're going to use a standard with the fabric, a 44, 45-inch. I'm going to tell you how much you need for each of those widths of fabric, plus an 8 or a 10-inch overage for the final quilting. 8-inch if you're going to be doing your own free motion quilting, if you're going to be doing quilting on your embroidery machine, and then the 10-inch if you're going to be using a long arm or taking it to the long armor. However, I have mentioned right at the bottom, so don't skip reading this, read it all the way through, that if you use a long armor, check with them, because some long armors like a 12-inch overage. Most of the ones that I've talked to, and I'm just learning long arming myself, so I'm starting out with this way, use a 10-inch overage in my area. But your long armor might use a different overage, and they might supply a batting for you as part of their fee. You need to check with them on all of that, but you'll need the same amount of batting if you're bringing it to them. If you're bringing the top and the batting and backing to them, you're going to need the same amount of batting as you need for your backing fabric as well, okay? But just call, send them an email, whatever you need to do in advance so that they can tell you if any of that needs to be different for their preference and their process, okay? Because we wouldn't want you to get it there and then find out you didn't have enough fabric, or no, I only use a 6-inch overage, which I sincerely doubt, but something odd that you wouldn't have thought of. So you'll want to check with them. So all of that is on here, and your backing is, and your batting as well. Now, earlier this year, we did a little 2-part video series on batting, and we talked about and did examples of just about every batting that I've ever worked with or could think of, and a couple that I found randomly, and we went ahead and tested those out too. Those videos are here on the channel, and I will link them at the end of this video so that you can watch them and see what batting you might want to use. If you're going to use this intentionally as a wall quilt, I would highly recommend that an 80-20 is all you're, an 80-20 batting is all you're going to need. I wouldn't use anything that is a more expensive heritage kind of level, as I call it, batting. Okay, I wouldn't use like a silk or silk bamboo or anything like that. If you're going to use it to actually give it to a child or use it as a lap quilt or something like that, you might choose a different batting, but an 80-20 is always a good place to start. So I'll link those videos for you and you can check them out. And then I give you one last larger photo of what the quilt is going to look like. And then the very last page is what you can use this pattern for, how you can use it, what you can't use it for. So please read through that, okay? I wouldn't want you to try and do something and then find out that that was something I've asked you not to do, which is really basically you can't sell the pattern or teach the pattern without my permission. But if you want to make this quilt 50,000-60,000 times and sell it at a craft fair, anything like that, you could do that. You just need to give credit to Build a Quilt, okay? So that is what comes in the instruction packet, all right? Plus the file folder that has the 2 segment videos on it, and or the 2 segment files on it. The videos for how to make those segments is coming up here in a minute. Now, I did want to just talk real briefly about the fabric. So you need a dark fabric, and I have chosen this Kimberbell Make Yourself at Home Deep Navy Linen. It's not linen, it's cotton, but when you look at it, the pattern that is printed on here gives it that textural look like a linen. Now, when I have these things laid down here on the table, folks, if they're hard for you to see, remember on your phone or your even on like your pads and stuff, you should be able to pinch and expand the areas to see them closer up if you need to, okay? But that is the Make Yourself at Home. That's my dark. Then I tell you, you need a medium dark. And this is what I've used here. And this is from Kimberbell. It's called Star Spangled Navy Bouquet. Now, I just purchased all of these fabrics within the last couple of weeks. So they're available out there in the industry. Check your local shops that sell Kimberbell. If you can't find them at a local place, of course, you can look online. I purchased mine through the Fat Quarter Shop, but you can always check my girlfriend's quilt shop. You can check Missouri Star or any other online retailer that you prefer to use. Then you need a medium fabric, and I have chosen the Kimberbell Basics Blue Tufted Star. This fabric comes in lots of colors, and I use it a lot. Like every single colorway that Kimberbell makes this in, I use it. I love this fabric. These little tufted stars gives this fabric a little bit of texture and motion, so it's not a flat solid, and it's just really beautiful. It's got some high colors and low colors. It's a nice blend, and I just found this to be a beautiful fabric for my medium. And then for my light fabric, I'm using the Kimberbell Basics Blue Dots. I keep the Kimberbell Basics fabrics in my fabric stash all the time. Like I try never to run out. And if I do, I try to order a little bit more because I use them all the time. Now, those of you that know me know that I am a big Tula Pink fan. There are some of these fabrics from Kimberbell that even go well with Tula's fabrics. So I really love them. And these two here, the Tufted Star and the Dot, those are both from the Basics line. The pattern, the print is from the Star Spangled line called Navy Bouquet. And this is from the Make Yourself at Home collection called Deep Navy Linen. And the Deep Navy Linen also comes in other colors as well. I really like the brown one. It really looks like a deep brown with this textural look to it. But those are the fabrics that I have chosen. When I cut, well, let's talk about pre-washing. I personally am not a pre-washer. A lot of our modern fabrics have been pre-washed already. You don't really get much shrinkage. And if I'm doing a wall quilt that I know I'm not going to be washing except for the original wash, then I just don't pre-wash. It's up to you. If you're using really dark fabrics that you think are going to bleed color, then yes, you might want to pre-wash them, and you might want to use a color catcher sheet in your wash. I always do that. And if you're going to give this as a gift, attach laundering instructions and a couple of color catchers with that information about what they are so they can purchase more later for themselves if they need them. Because I've been using them for years and years since they first came out just on my laundry. And then I started using them on my quilts, and they really do help to pull in excess color that gets in the water before it has a chance to really stain your lighter fabrics. So whether you pre-wash or not is entirely up to you. I don't judge if you do. I don't judge if you don't. Alrighty, you could do this quilt scrappy if you wanted to. If you're going to do it scrappy, what I would do, I'm trying to find here. This is the single block. You're going to be doing 4 of those. If I were going to be doing it scrappy, I'd do each block in a different set of colors, different set of fabrics. So I might do a curated scrappy, meaning a scrappy of, say, yellows and a scrappy of greens, a scrappy of red and a scrappy of blue, or any color combination that you want. But I wouldn't maybe do everything crazy scrappy everywhere. And to tie it all together, I might use the same background color. And the background color, well, I suppose the darkest fabric, this deep navy linen, is the fabric that I would call my background. But you could certainly play around with that too. That's why you get that coloring sheet. Make sure, feel free to download that coloring sheet and print out as many copies as you need. And if you have a little one who's going to be with you while you're working, or you want to be doing some work, sit that little one down with the crayons and a couple versions of that, or a couple copies of that coloring sheet, and let them go to town. I find that that really helps keep them occupied while you're doing your quilting as well. So in regard to cutting the fabric, because we cut in strips, I just start by unfolding, and then I refold. I know a lot of quilters don't like to cut, let me flip this over, when there's a fold, because they get a kink there. However, if you lay this really flat and you have a really good straight cut, I've never gotten that problem. So I just start cutting. And what I do is I take my cut sheet and I pre-cut all of the pieces that I'm going to need. I try to give you enough fabric so that if you have one or two boo-boos in your cutting, you can go ahead and recut that piece. However, if you make a big mistake and you need to order more fabric, just make sure when you choose your fabrics that you're not buying everything they have, and that you can get that fabric again, okay? All righty. Now, one other thing. Today's the day, because this week is the week you're going to choose your fabrics if you haven't already from that initial video, and that you're going to cut your fabrics, because next week, and this week, we're going to start making our segment pieces. So what I'd like you to do this week, choose your fabric, cut your fabric, and make at least 2 of the full block stars, okay? That's going to help keep you up. I told you we're going to move along quickly, but that's only so that you have all the information. You might decide not to do this quilt along till January or something in the doldrums of winter. That's okay. That's cool. But you're going to have all the information you need. We're not going to be like on week 24 of this thing saying, oh, now we're going to do this. Okay. I'm giving you all the information you need in 4 weeks, and then you can take it and run with it. So what I'd like you to do is fabric, cut fabric, and if you can, make enough segments so that you can make 2 of these blocks. Okay. That will keep you, you don't have to sew the blocks together. In fact, you won't sew the blocks together this week. That's not going to start till next week. But if you can get segments made for 2 of these, then you're going to be ahead of the game. All right. Okay. Now, today is also the day, if you have not changed your rotary cutter recently, and by that, I mean like in the last few weeks, and you've been quilting a lot lately, go give yourself a new rotary blade. Why? Because if you have a sharp, clean blade, you're going to get smoother cuts, you're not going to get nicks, and you're going to get less fraying. And when we get ready to start trimming our segments out of our stabilizer, try a pinking blade. This is what I cut my pieces out each and every time with. I have a separate 45mm handle, and I use a pinking blade. Why? That blade gives you a nice cut if it's new, and the nice thing is it takes bulk out of your seams. We're going to talk about all of that next week. So this week, don't even bother cutting your segments out of the stabilizer. Just get them made. Next week, we'll talk about cutting them out of the stabilizer and piecing them together. Okay. All right, everybody, here comes the 2 videos that are going to demonstrate how to make the half square and the square. And then I want to show you how you can go and get this pattern. So you just want to head over to our website, www.mybuildaquilt.com. If you have any questions throughout the process at all, please feel free to leave a comment or contact me at support@sewincommon.com. I'm usually up fairly late, so I will answer questions late into the evening. And if I don't, I will try to get back with you the very next morning. I try not to leave you hanging. However, it's in the middle of the night. I have to sleep sometime like we all do. So it might be the next morning. If I have to find something out for you, I will at least get back with you and say, thanks for contacting me. I need to research this a little bit, and I'll get back with you in the morning, or for whatever reason. But don't think that I'm going to leave you high and dry and hanging for a day or 2 or anything like that. Okay. All right, everybody. This is the start of our Star Chart Quilt Along. I love this quilt. I think it's one of the prettiest wall quilts I've designed so far. I'm not bragging. I just really love it. I love how it turned out. We've got the center star, which is your center, like our star, the sun, right in the center. And it comes out into like 4 other star systems. So this would be like that whole system's star chart. Yes, I am a total space nut. So that's why I've called it that. And that's why I've chosen the blues. However, please feel free to think about using other colors if you want to. All right. Here comes the how-to video segments, and I'll see you next Tuesday, the 11th of November at noon, with our next video where we will be cutting our fabric out, or our segments out of the stabilizer, and we'll be talking about putting them together, okay, and the layout for the single block. Until next time, everybody, as I always tell you, as quilters, we are artists, so let's all go quilt life beautiful. Bye for now.
Hi folks, this demonstration is all about making the square. And remember, it doesn't matter what size square you're going to make it this way every single time. Now I've loaded my thread with a black thread today so that you can see it, and I have my wash away stabilizer in my 5x7 hoop. But what I truly like to use when I'm piecing is this Wonderfill Deco Bob 80 weight thread in the pearl gray. It's a beautiful piecing thread, and it works great for Build A Quilt because, once again, it helps to take any of the bulk out of your seams that a 40 weight might add in. However, if you don't have the Deco Bob 80 weight, you can use a 40 weight thread. In that respect, I like to use the Isacord 0184 in the pearl gray for that. So the very first thing you do after you've loaded your design into your machine is you're going to make sure that you have edited your pattern. There we go. And it is going to stitch out the border of the design. So in these demonstrations, I'm actually making 3-inch finished designs. It's a little easier for you to see them in the hoop. And so it is going to stitch out the full border of my design. And as a square, it's only 2 steps. This step right here, so that I know where my fabric is going to be placed. And then I'm going to take my fabric, lay it right over it. Now, because this is black, I'm seeing the outline with the white fabric, but if you can't, just know that you can feel this edge right here where the edge of the design is. So if I can feel right there, and I know I have that much space, I know I'm going to have plenty of space when I go to cut this out. If I had laid it down and I feel my line is right here and that's my edge, I know I need to slide that over a little bit. All right, now the second step and final step for the square is just to stitch your fabric right down onto the stabilizer. I have my speed set at about 600 stitches per minute. I am a quilter that doesn't believe in racing. I find you end up with more trouble than you think you're going to get. Now, in regard to the bobbin, I have used just a plain white pre-wound bobbin. However, because you're going to be stitching in something like the pearl gray, if you have a hard time seeing that color on your fabric for your final stitching of your pieces together, you could use a black bobbin so that you can see that final stitch line. And you would be able to see it here, but you wouldn't necessarily see it there. So that's another option for you. Otherwise, just a white bobbin is just fine. And that is how you make the square. Okay friends, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a half square triangle the Build A Quilt way. Now I'm using a black thread, a 40 weight, so that you can see it, but normally I would use this pearl gray. It's by Wonderfill. It's called Deco Bob, and it's an 80 weight. An 80 weight thread is perfectly strong enough for your quilts in the Build A Quilt system, and it takes some of the bulk out of your seam by using a lighter weight thread. However, if all you have is a 40 weight, that's perfectly fine as well, or you can always use a 50 weight cotton if that's what you have. If you use cotton thread, please remember to clean out your bobbin case after each set of things that you do so that you don't get any lint in there. Now, as with all segment pieces with Build A Quilt, you start out by stitching out the first piece right on your stabilizer. This tells you how big basically your finished piece is going to be and the general shape. So we're making a general square and we're going to turn it into the half square triangle. Now, with many of our segment pieces, the second step is also stitched directly to the stabilizer, and that's what we'll do right now. And what this will do is it's basically going to show me where I'm going to put the first half of my fabric and give me an outline so that when I lay my fabric down, I know I have it in the right place. Okay, now with Build a Quilt, just like with any other quilting technique, it helps, if you can, to lay your lighter fabric down first. That way, when you put your second fabric, your darker fabric down, you don't have any shadowing coming through the light fabric. However, you should always remember to follow the instructions in the pattern. If a pattern tells you to lay down a dark fabric first, then by all means go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take my white piece of fabric. Actually, let me stop for one moment. When you cut your fabric for a half square triangle, you cut 2 squares and then you cut them diagonally. So with each 2 squares, you actually are going to get enough fabric to make 2 half square triangles. If you don't need them both for the current project you're working on, you could make a second one and set it aside for another project in, say, a scrappy quilt, or you can put these in your pre-cut area and have them for a later use. All right, I'm going to take my white fabric here and I'm going to lay it down. Now, because I can see through this because it's white and black, that's easy. I know that I have a good 1/4 inch beyond this line right here for my seam. But if I couldn't see it, I can feel this seam easily with my fingers. All I have to make sure is that I have roughly a 1/4 inch past there. If it's a little less or a little more, that's not going to matter because the digital file is going to stitch your seam in the right place each and every time. With the half square triangle, we don't have any trimming that we have to do during the process because everything that lies outside of your boundary will get trimmed off when you create or when you cut it out of the stabilizer at a later step. So we're going to stitch this down right now. And your first piece of fabric and all subsequent first pieces for any block always get laid down with the print side up, the pretty side up, or right side up, however you wish to say that. And then all other pieces in the process will get laid with the fabric right side down or pretty side down. Now the half square triangle is really easy because what we're going to do is we're going to take our fabric in piece number 2, turn it over so that right sides are together, and we're going to lay it just right on top of the piece that we just did, and you'll see why here in just a moment. Our next step, which is step 4, is going to stitch this onto the stabilizer so that they're hooked together in the center. Now, I bet you've guessed as to why we put that right side down, because the next step is to flip it over and give it a little finger press. You can use a seam roller if you like. You can also tape this down right here if you would like with a little bit of your fabric tape. Always tape outside of the seam line. That way you're not trying to dig tape out of your stitches. And because we're only asking our machine to do a straight stitch, if we're pulling tape out, we're more likely to also break our thread and have the thread line come out. That won't happen if your tape is always on the outside of your stitch line. So I'm just folding this over. I'm giving a little finger press. And now with step number 5, we will stitch this half to the stabilizer. Now, you might think that you're done because you can see there's our half square triangle. However, there is one more final step to every piece that isn't like the square or just a single triangle or a single rectangle, and that is another outline stitch. And the reason for that is because where our fabrics come together, they're not completely stitched together to make it a cohesive unit. So when we stitch around now all the way, it's going to take any points where we have fabrics coming together and lock them together. So what I need to do now is I definitely need to get some of my fabric tape, because when this stitches around, if my foot comes up to this piece, it's very likely that it'll grab that piece and do something really silly like that, turn it over or squish it up or something, which is going to make me have to take out the seam ripper. That's a no-no, right? So here's what I was saying about using your fabric tape. Go ahead and place it outside the stitch mark, but just place it over those so that that is laying nice and flat. Now, when I come around to this piece of fabric, because my fold there is heading in the same direction as my foot, I'm not coming against it, I don't really need to put tape there because my foot won't catch this part out here because it's going in that direction. So now we'll stitch out our final line, and this line also, the second thing that this line does is it gives you the line on the back of the piece for when you stitch these together on your sewing machine. If you want to really be able to see that line really well on the back, you could always put in a black bobbin at that case so that you could see that line when you go to stitch your pieces together. I would recommend that if you are someone that has a hard time seeing those lighter colored threads, then you would definitely see that line right there if you used a black bobbin. All right, everyone, that's how simple it is to make a half square triangle.